Welcome to the AI argument. I'm here with my co-host Justin Collery, and I'm Prendergast. And wow, it's another jam-packed, action-packed week for AI. What's been catching your eye, Justin?
What a brilliant what I tell you, I was thinking about the show today and I was just thinking about everything that's gone on this week. And it's just so interesting. It's just so interesting what's been happening this week. And it'll be fascinating. Like we're living through historic times. So we've had a couple of big model releases this week. And I know sometimes when I talk to people, they say, who cares? So let's talk a bit about why it's important and what does it mean. We've had a really interesting article from Sam Altman calling for regulation and certain things to be done. I mean, this is a week for me that AI became political. There's really political ramifications in what Sam Altman was asking for. It's a week
Mm,
where we've seen the divide between the different visions of the future. And the different visions that I saw was you have the closed source open AI vision of the future. You've got the open source meta vision of the future. And then you have the no source, no AI EU vision of the future because the models that were released are too dangerous to be allowed to be used by European. So we're not going to get our hands on them, apparently. So yeah, a really interesting week. But I think we should start with something that is, I know it's close to your heart. It's very close to my heart. And it's a fascinating study that was done by a research organization affiliated with OpenAI to do with UTI or USI or UBI or whatever you like to call it these days, where they gave 1,000 people $1,000 for 3 years and studied the effect on their mental health, on their wellness, on their employment benefit, and so on. Did you read that study?
yeah, I did. I did a bit of a deep dive on it during the week because I'm fascinated by this, and I've been waiting. I've been waiting for these results to come out because Sam Altman has been talking about this experiment that he's been running. And so I was really excited for the results to come out. And one of the things that's come up as I've been talking to people is, they've been saying, but hang on, what exactly is this? Because it's not a universal basic income. So they didn't give people, a living wage. They gave people something more akin to a stipend, I guess. But I think the point is, like, the study itself never classified itself as a UBI study or anything like that. I think the term they use is unconditional cash. So the questions that they were trying to answer were around just what happens? What happens when you give people unconditional cash? Because, obviously this experiment happened in the US. And, I was reading about like government assistance and government benefits and the like in the US as I was doing this deep dive. And, there are frequently quite a lot of stipulations, quite a lot of barriers, quite a lot of bureaucracy to access money. And a lot of the time you have to have been paying in the first place in order to receive benefits. Most people who are on
And that made
benefits.
this, and in this case, it made the study quite difficult because they had to give the money to the people in a way which wouldn't impact any other money that they could receive. So they had to be very careful about how they set up the experiment to make sure that being part of the experiment didn't disadvantage you in any other sense as well. Isn't that correct?
I believe so, and actually, in a way, it's almost a shame that this study happened when it did, because it's been over the last 3 years, and so people were receiving other COVID-related funds and assistance, which kind of complicates things a little bit. But there was a massive control group, and so the results are still fascinating and still stand, I think. But it's just it did happen at a weird time in society. Um, but the main thing is, yes, this was unconditional cash. You get this money, it's yours to do with as you please. And I read one article which said, because giving people cash unconditionally is bizarrely divisive. People
In America,
uh,
it is. I mean, I'm okay with getting cash.
I'm okay, I'm okay with getting it, but a lot of people are not okay with giving it.
Yes, yeah, that's actually the way.
And that seems global, that seems to be global, because there are UBI experiments across the globe that show that there are significant benefits to doing it, and yet really very few places have actually taken the leap and said, yeah, let's actually do it.
Let's
And this
control that.
article was saying,
This is important in the terms of AI, though, because we mightn't have a choice except to do something like this in the future. So that's why it's interesting in terms of, I mean, I think Sam Altman, was it Sam Altman himself, I think, funded this. I think he may have personally funded this
he
particular
certainly
study.
funded it personally in part. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I think that's, you have to judge at the moment of getting even more keen on judging people by their actions and not by their word. And so if somebody's prepared to fork out quite a lot of money over an extended period of time, certainly gives weight to what they say in this. So it's important from an AI perspective because we may get to a point where this is how people make money, right? So that's important to sort of take account of that. And then, okay, so then I have to pick you up on, the thing that there's been studies which say that this is beneficial for people and it's good. And I would say that this study shows that's not the case. Actually, this study showed that it didn't make any difference to them at all.
And
In
I would
fact,
disagree. And I would disagree. And this is exactly what the article was saying, was that people at both ends of the argument are going to use this study to further their own argument, because I think it was very positive. I think it was very clear that there was an improvement to these people's lives, especially when you consider, it was $1,000 a month. It was not a living wage. It was not an amount of money that's going to propel you into a different, completely different earning level, or it's not going to put you into a new tax bracket, or anything like that. And so I think the results were quite significant. I mean, even if we take the very fact alone that problematic drinking and drug taking was reduced significantly. So if we look at just that immediately says to me that the stress that was alleviated by this relatively small amount of money in these people's lives made a massive positive impact. We also saw that they were more likely to be entrepreneurial minded at the end of it. And for women and Black participants, they were more likely to have actually started a business at the end of the 3 years. They were also 10 times more likely to be looking for a job. And anyone who was looking for a job was able to go for fewer interviews because they were able to focus on jobs that were in alignment with what they saw as a career for themselves, aligning with their values and their beliefs. And yes, and here's the big problem one. Yes, they worked less, but it was a couple of hours less a week.
I don't think any of the effects were huge, right? And they worked an hour and a half less or something every
Yeah.
week. It wasn't a large amount. The one that stood out for me, the part of the study that jumped out at me was the self-reported stress. So at the start of the study, when they started receiving the money, the self-reported stress dropped hugely. And I thought, oh my God, this is exactly what you would expect. But at the end of the study, it went right back to where it was at the start. There was absolutely no difference between the control group
Well,
and the normal group. Well,
yeah.
yeah.
Let me ask you a question on that. Did it go back to what it was previously? Because I tried to dig into this and I actually couldn't quite get my head around what they were saying. Because what they said was there was a huge stress reduction in the first year.
Yep.
But that wasn't evident in the second and third year. But did they mean that the stress levels rose again? Or did they mean that there was no further reduction? I couldn't get my head around it.
My reading of it was that it reduced in the first year, but then there was no difference in the stress levels in the second and third year between the participants and the control group, which meant it went back up to being usual. And that makes total sense to me, right? So what they proved there is that humans are human. So if you put somebody into a situation where they've got basically no worries in the world except their cups are blue instead of pink, well, then the fact that their cups are blue instead of pink would become the biggest problem in the world, and they get very stressed about it. And what that says, and that's an important realization, right? You have to gamify the system. So in this potential future, which the study is sort of looking towards, right, or looking forward to, right, just giving everybody money isn't going to cut it, right? That's not going to be good enough. You have to there's still going to be a human desire for people to be a little bit better, or to show that they're better this way than the other, or to to do things. And that's why I'm saying you have to gamify it. So this idea that you can just throw money at everybody and that's going to keep everybody happy is absolutely not going to work. You're going to have to come up with some other ideas too.
Two, yes. And so I actually completely agree with you. Like, it's not a silver bullet solution, 100%. And I think, other UBI studies have shown this as well, that, there are problems with it, in that, money doesn't always reach the people who need it most. But it depends on, obviously it depends on the structure of the UBI. Um, but for sure, education, health, because there was no the study, the OpenAI, or sorry, the OpenResearch study didn't show any major impact on health overall, even though spending on health was increased. So people felt like they were able to access health um, services more easily. There was no actual tangible benefit to their health. So, things like our health systems and things like education are still going to have to also go along in tandem with this. And, if we're talking about a situation where AI takes our jobs and there's no other employment, and we're talking about an actual UBI or an actual universal thriving wage, then we are also going to need to address things that we've talked about before in this show, like purpose. And, like, literally, what is our purpose in life? What do we do with our time? How do we actually engage with our community? So it's not a silver bullet solution. However, unfortunately, I'm not going to remember who I'm quoting, but there was one person I was reading, who was a very big advocate for UBI, and he just made the point, in a capitalist system, you need money, and so, full stop, there it is. As in, um, no matter what else we have to do, we have to ensure people have money, unless we're going to completely overhaul the capitalist system, which I'm all for, but I'm not sure what we move to.
Jesus, right. No, I can't do that. Not this week. Um, but I will say to you, right, that I don't think the study, in terms of health and long-term effects, right, I don't think the study was long enough to like, one of the areas where I think there would be an enormous benefit will be mental health. And I don't think 3 years and $1,000 is enough to determine that. But I think in a lot of countries, and in particular in America, if you walk around the streets in America, it seems to me that there's a lot, there's an apparent mental health issue that's caused by people not having a safety net, right? It causes people to do desperate things. So having like this inherent UBI safety net is going to greatly improve their mental health. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is, in terms of purpose, is the study did show that people were more entrepreneurial and they wanted to set up businesses.
Mm.
And I think in a post AGI world, where, you're working because that's what gives you, an interaction with people and it gives you something to do and whatever. Well, actually, that's brilliant, because that's exactly what people should be doing. Setting up businesses to, whittle. I mean, I'm a big fan of wood whittling myself, and I hope to have a shed in my back garden and whittle wood in the future, or whatever it happens to be. Right. So I think that's pretty good. Maybe this is probably a good point to move on to. Sam Altman also caught my attention this week because he had an article in the Wall Street Journal, I believe it was. Was it the Wall Street Journal? Washington Post, I think. The Washington Post is where it
Completely
was.
forgotten where it was.
And so this was interesting because he had an article in the Washington Post, and he said that this was a defining moment for the world, a defining moment for civilization, and very similar to the situational awareness paper, which was written before, right? I mean, he kind of echoed in many senses some of that. That's Ashley, whatever his name was, Bruckenheimer, was it?
Leon Action Runner.
Yes, whatever. He had a very long name. But he called for four things, right? He said that it's very important. He said that this was a time for action. He was really putting the weight behind it. And it was a call to action, really. And the four things that he said, first was, he said that we needed to put in robust security measures. And what he meant were physical security measures as well as software security measures. So he was saying that this was a technology of strategic, importance for a country, and that we should protect it as such, right? Which is quite an incredible thing to say, given what Meta were doing in the same week. He also called for an enormous infrastructure build out, by which he means electricity. He means huge power stations, and he was calling for that to be happened.
Yeah.
He then, really interested, especially for a person my age, was calling for diplomacy, which he went on to further clarify meant export control on hardware and software, which really again points to a technology which is far more powerful than the technology we have today. And then the last thing he called on was an international agency like ICANN, which is what we use to regulate the internet, or the Atomic Agency or something like that. Did you read the article? What was your thoughts on it?
I read it, and there was one thing weirdly jumped out at me. And so you referenced Meta there, and because we'll get on to that in a minute, the fact that Meta have released Llama 3.1, one of the or the biggest open sourced LLM. And they're saying that the largest model of that is as powerful. They're calling it a frontier LLM. Excuse me. And so it was and Mark Zuckerberg had an open letter about that and about how open source is the way to go. So at first I was reading these, and I was reading these letters as being completely at odds, because of the fact that Sam Altman was talking about locking everything down, making sure that everything was secure, making sure that authoritarian states would not be able to steal the models, the model weights, the training data, everything. Um, so what jumped out at me was that in a paragraph later, he talks about the need for open source models to allow for all nations to kind of, to stay abreast of what's going on. Did you notice that? Did you notice his reference to open source models? Because
This
this was in Sam Altman's article. And open source
that did not jump out at me. So Sam Altman said that there should be small, noddy open source models that
I
everybody
think
should be.
maybe that's what he was talking about. So he said,
Boy,
making sure open source models are readily available to developers in those nations will further bolster our advantage. The challenge of who will lead on AI is not just about exporting technology, it's about exporting the values that the technology upholds.
yeah. That's what I say. This is so political, right? Because that's a political statement, not a technological or a business statement. And that's a statement. I mean, another way of saying that is AI is going to allow us to control the world and export our culture to people that, and I'm okay in a way, right? This comes down to, well, who's as a European, whose values are we more aligned with? Are we more aligned with, an American's values? Are we more aligned with Chinese values? Or more aligned with Russian values? We don't have a horse in this game. I mean, not really. We got Mistral, who are pretty good, but we're not really leading the charge here.
Mhm.
So I think our ideals are more aligned with the US. And so when he talks about having sort of literally they're talking about, here's a technology which is going to change the world. Now you're either with us or against us. And if you're with us, we'll give you access to technology on our terms.
Mm.
And if you're not going to get access to it. That's basically what he's saying. And that's a pretty powerful to say that. And given the people that are on their boards of directors now, the head of the NSA and so on, it would make you think that they have a very clear path to a technology which is, world changing, that they've seen it or they have it already and they're holding it back. That's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah, and this is what, unfortunately for our show, it makes it very difficult for us to have a good old-fashioned argument about this, because I'm looking at the article from Sam Altman, and I'm looking at the open letter from Mark Zuckerberg, and I'm thinking, I am deeply uncomfortable with both of these positions.
Ah. But Mark Zuckerberg is just wrong. He's
Talk
just
to me.
wrong.
Tell me why.
Okay.
Tell me why. I mean, so he's saying open source is the way forward, and he's making the argument that open sourced is safer because of by virtue of the fact that so many people will be analyzing it and contributing to it. He feels that it will result in safer models, and then he gets a little bit vague about why it will be safer from a bad actor perspective. He says it, he doesn't quite convince me on that point, but I
I
can
think
see.
Mark Zuckerberg might actually be the bad actor in this particular instance. Why is he doing this? Like,
Mm,
just what is the purpose, right? Why do Meta care? And I don't get why Meta care. I don't understand. It cost them maybe 120 to 150 million dollars to create this model, which is a frontier model. Um, and we will go right. I do want to just look at what he said in his open letter, but just the important points, right? The really, really important technical point about when they released the new model, when Meta released Llama 3.1, the biggest model in its frontier, and it's one of the best. They also, to their credit, released a very large scientific paper, which went through the process, detailed the process they went to make the model. And the most astonishing thing in that entire paper was that there is no secret sauce. There was no magic. It literally was the same process that they used to make all the previous models, just scaled up, just with more data, more compute. And that's how they made this frontier model. So everything that's been going on for the last 2 years, when we thought, oh my God, OpenAI have done this incredible thing. OpenAI were just the first ones to train on that amount of data with that amount of compute. They happened to get there first, but there was nothing, obviously it's not that easy, but there was nothing special about it. So that, in a sense, that's concerning, because if you're talking about bad actors and stuff like that, as long as they can get enough compute and enough data, they can do it themselves too. Nothing's stopping them. So,
Well, I guess this comes back then to Sam Altman saying we need to have a tight hold on the technology and basically on the chips and on the compute power, and comes back to
correct.
the embargo on chips to China and things like that is the only way to control it. It would seem.
Yeah, but just before we came on air, I was browsing through Mark Zuckerberg's open letter, the one that you had pointed me toward, as to why open source is good for the world and for Mark Zuckerberg in particular, I suspect. And so he says we need to train, fine tune, and distill our own model. No, we don't. We don't. I'm quite happy to have, like in every other part of the world, we outsource, big technical hard things to other people to do, and I don't see why AI will be any different.
But to be fair,
Yeah.
but to be fair, like companies are saying that, like companies do have a deep mistrust of like sharing their data with OpenAI, for example, and so
No.
for them to you say no, you say
No.
no, they don't, or no, they shouldn't.
Well, because again, right, what companies say and what companies do are two completely different things,
Mhm.
right? So companies say, "Oh, I don't want to share all my data." Sorry, where is your data right now? Is it in Azure or is it in AWS? Which one? Right? So you've already shared all your data. It's not sitting somewhere in a bunker that you control. It's in somebody else's bunker that they control.
So you
So
think this is just a fear of new technology, and that'll settle down, and that won't be an issue?
back in 1998, I remember I was working in Bank of Ireland in 1998. I asked for an email address, and I was laughed at and told that cost £3,000 as it was back in the day. And I could talk to the outside world, and we didn't want that happening. They were probably wise. They probably were. So, but listen, look at this. It's a whole double speak, right? So we need to train and fine tune. Be very, very careful, because I saw OpenAI also this week talking about fine tuning models. I
Hmm.
think that's a way to try and lock you in, because it's going to be harder for you to move if you've got a fine tuned model, right? So I don't buy that one, right? Then the next point, we need to control our own destiny and not get locked into a closed vendor. I can tell you that controlling our own destiny means locking ourselves into a closed vendor. If you give the technology to everybody, you are losing control of your own destiny, because you don't control how people use it. And that's where the real danger is. How are people going to use the technology? If it's controlled centrally and you have a bad actor, well, they have to go through your servers in order to use it in a bad way. Whereas if you give it away and just let anybody use it and tell them exactly how to build their own one, well, then you've greatly increased the chances of a bad actor using it in a bad way. I think that bad actors are pretty lacking in imagination. But anyway, uh, I love the next point that Mark Zuckerberg made. We need to protect our data. This is Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook fame. Yeah. The guy, we need to protect our data. Yeah, I don't know. And we need a model that is efficient and affordable to run. Well, this week, OpenAI, or last week, released GPT-4o Mini, which is 1/20th of the price of a model that was released, a year and a half ago. The models are getting smaller and more intelligent, and we don't need Meta to release open source models to do that. So I don't know. I don't buy it. I really, really question the reason why Meta have a horse or, have skin in this game. I don't get it. I don't understand why they care.
I mean, I can understand that they want to have control, and I can understand also that, for Mark, we don't know what Mark Zuckerberg's. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg's. Right, I'll start again. We know that Mark Zuckerberg, before he got fully invested in AI, his vision was for a VR, AR, augmented reality, virtual reality future. And I think it took him a little bit of time to realize that AI could play a huge part in that future.
Hmm.
Now, so we've heard him talk about the future of like living in a permanently augmented reality. So we would all just have glasses or contact lenses that had an augmented reality layer over it, and that I could chat to your artificial intelligent version of yourself as if you were in the same room here with me. And I'm assuming that somewhere in that vision, he's like, well, if I'm reliant on OpenAI, they might say, hang on, you can't clone somebody in an AI version. That's unethical. And so we're not going to let you do it. I'm assuming that it's some big picture, big vision thing in the future that he may want to do, which we may all very well find questionable. But I'm assuming that it's something around that. And I also think, I think we were chatting about this before, that when he came a little bit late to the AI game, as far as I know, and he found it very difficult to put together a team because a lot of people turned him down because they were unsure about his ethics. And my understanding is the only person he could get to come and lead the team was Jan LeCun, who is brilliant.
Hmm.
And he said, "Yeah, I'll come and work for you, but everything has to be open sourced." So I wonder how much that plays into it as well. I
Possibly.
don't know.
Possibly. We're all worried this week about losing our jobs and AI taking over, and it's getting more capable and whatever. And okay, there may be a pushback, but the pushback has started this week with the Made by Humans logo. Tell me about this.
Yeah, I think this was something that somebody on Instagram was just like, okay, I'm sick of all this AI generated rubbish. My art is human authored, and they created this logo to indicate. And I think it's a hand, creating something, and it says, what does it say? Authored by a human, or created by a human, or
Created by human, yeah.
created by a human. And then people started to notice it. And from this one person doing that, it kind of took off, and now artists everywhere are creating their own version of it in their own style, to prove, or not to prove, but to proudly display the fact that their work is created by a human. And it's very cool, and all of the different versions of the logo are amazing and really cool. But it also just strikes me of, about the fragility of the human ego, and how I, I just feel it's a little bit of hiding, putting your head in the sand a little bit. Um, because, it's a reaction to what they see as something that is not art, because it's not created by a human. But to my mind, it's like, well, then it shouldn't need a logo to say created by a human, you know? If
Really interesting take, Craig. Because I actually think this is a brilliant idea. I love it. And as a marketing gimmick, I would have thought it's quite a good gimmick. If I see two things and one of them says created by a human, I think that's something that is going to resonate with people over the next, you know, 12 months or 24 months from now. I think that's going to have resonance. I think that's going to matter to people.
Here's the thing, though, I think that, so I agree that human creativity will have a value beyond AI created works. But I think the value is in knowing the story, knowing the person, knowing the history, knowing the process. A logo isn't going to do it. I think there will be an inherent value because you know the creator, whether it's just from their Instagram feed, or from, whatever it might be, from interviews you've seen with them, or from something you've read about them. I don't. I think the logo is cute, and I actually really enjoy looking through all the different versions of the logo. But I just think it's it's not an answer to anything. It's a knee jerk reaction to the creative ego of the human, kind of being like, oh dear.
That's good. I think there should be a little logo. Guaranteed human is what I'd put. A bit like guaranteed Irish. A little guaranteed humanish logo down
Yeah.
the bottom. Guaranteed Justo down the bottom. Guaranteed Frank. And I think that would be good. I actually really like it. I think it's a brilliant thing. I think we're going to see more of that. And I think it's kind of cool. I like it a lot. Frank, that seems like a pretty good note to wrap up on. Been an incredible week. We still hold our breath for GPT 4.5, maybe next week. A nation
I,
will
I'm seeing. Oh, you mean five? You mean five? Do you?
it'll be called 4.5.
That's interesting because because a couple of episodes you were looking forward to GPT-5, and now you've downgraded to like, yeah, maybe I'll get 4.1.
Give me anything. There was this funny interplay going on between Sam Altman and this guy called Jimmy Apples on Twitter. I refuse to call it X. And where Sam Altman is talking about the importance of AI and all of these things, and Jimmy Apples, who works in OpenAI, is just going, just release the bleeding model, just release it. And that's all he ever says now on Twitter.
Oh,
It's hilarious.
oh wow.
It's brilliant
Okay.
to watch. And he's talking about, and I don't know if this is true or not, but Jimmy Apples keep talking about how he's played in Red Dead Redemption 2, and he's now 80% through the game. And I don't know, is he really saying that's the red team testing it and they're 80% done? To me, in my mind, it is, but I don't know. And
Interesting.
I've become so jaded by the whole thing. I only judge now on actions, not on words or vibes, or just show me the goddamn model. Let's get a hold of it.
Yeah. Well, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. I will chat to you next week.
Brilliant. Great talking, Frank. We talk to you next
Great
week.
stuff as always. Cheers, Justin.
Yeah.